Cost of living in Illinois versus Tennessee. So, what are some of the benefits of moving to Tennessee from Illinois? Tennessee and Illinois have some similarities, including their rich landscapes, but Tennessee has a lot of benefits if you're thinking of relocating. Now, Illinois is in the Midwest. It's got the fertile Midwest farming soil, and Tennessee is much more mountainous and wooded, so very different in the topography of the land, and it just depends on what you're looking for. Now, if you're looking to move to Tennessee from Illinois, it's most likely because of the cost of living comparison. Now, it's much cheaper to live in Tennessee than it is in Illinois, and we're going to break down some of those differences here. So if you're considering a change in scenery and a lower cost of living, Tennessee might be the place for you. When you're considering the housing market in Illinois, in general, houses actually cost a little bit less in Illinois than in Tennessee. Now, that might be misleading. You can't just look at the average price per home because the cost of living as a total includes things like taxes, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So while the average price of a home in the state of Illinois is cheaper than the average price of a home in Tennessee, the cost of living overall is definitely not cheaper in Illinois. We are going to do a comparison of the average price of a home in Tennessee versus Illinois, and also comparing the major cities in each state of Nashville versus Chicago. Once you see this analysis, it'll make sense to you the differences in cost of living in the two states. So as of October 2022, according to Zillow, the average cost of a home in the entire state of Tennessee comes in at $309,460. Now this is 22.7% over the last 12 months. We've seen a rise in housing prices in Tennessee, just like the rest of the country. Now compared to the national average of $357,810, the average home in Tennessee is cheaper than the national average, about 86.5% of the national average, but is still more expensive than the average home in Illinois. And speaking of that average cost of a home in Illinois, you're coming in at about $267,383, which is up 10.9% over the last 12 months. Similarly, the housing cost is up in Illinois, not quite as much as Tennessee. Very, very popular to move to Tennessee in the last year or so. And the average price of a home in Illinois is about 74.7% of the national average. Once again, you want to make sure that you're not just comparing the price of a home, but also the taxes that go along with it. And we'll get into property taxes in a little bit. So now diving into the average home price of the main cities in each state, we're looking at Nashville, Tennessee, which is the capital city of Tennessee, but the average cost of a home in Nashville, Tennessee is $458,485, which is up 25.4% over the last 12 months and does come in more expensive than the national average. Now, there's a 1.26% population growth. Nashville, Tennessee is one of the most popular destinations for people to move to, and that is reflected in the rising home cost. Now, if you're looking at the biggest city in Illinois, which is obviously Chicago, the average cost of a home is $315,429, which is up 6.5% in the last year, but it is still lower than the national average as far as a home in Chicago. Now, this is also a little bit misleading because Chicago is a very, very urbanized area, and this is including condos and things like that. So it brings down the price a little bit in the city of Chicago, but on average, the cost of a home in Chicago is definitely cheaper than the price of a home in Nashville. So with that in mind, with the knowledge that the average price of a home in each main city is definitely lower in Illinois, let's look at the tax rates, because this is where you will basically see that the cost of living as a whole is definitely more in Illinois than in Tennessee. So when you look at the total tax burden, this is where it gets a little bit ugly for Illinois. 9.91% total tax burden for the state of Illinois comes in as the 10th worst out of all 50 states, as opposed to a total tax burden of 5.75% in Tennessee, which is the second lowest out of all 50. Only Alaska has a lower total tax burden as a state. Now, this total tax burden, it breaks down into income taxes, sales taxes, and property taxes. And once we talk about property taxes, you'll understand what I'm saying about the cost of living in Illinois being more expensive, because the taxes that you pay on your home basically mean that you're going to be making a second home payment, and I'll show that here in a little bit. So when you're looking at income taxes, Illinois has a cumulative 2.22% income tax, which is right about in the middle of the country, 30th highest out of 50, as opposed to Tennessee, which has no personal state income tax, coming in at 0.06% income tax, just because of the small amount of corporate tax that you have in Tennessee. That brings in Tennessee as the 43rd highest, or the 7th lowest in the entire country. Having no personal income tax is a huge selling point that's driving a lot of people from whatever state they're living in to Tennessee. So looking at sales tax, actually Illinois is a little bit lower, like the average price of a home, at 3.5%. It's the 23rd highest out of 50, and again, right in the middle or so. Tennessee is a 3.98%, just a little bit higher than Illinois. It comes in at 14th highest out of 50. So the sales tax is really where the state of Tennessee collects most of their taxes, because as you'll see, in the property taxes, they are the second lowest in the entire country. The state of Tennessee mainly brings in their tax revenue through sales tax, so that's why this one's a little higher than Illinois and other states in the country. Because of our low income tax and our low property tax, it has to come somewhere, and it's largely through the sales tax. And lastly, when we're looking at property taxes, Illinois has a 3.98% property tax rate, which is 8th highest out of 50. This is what I was talking about when we say that when you buy a home, you're not only buying a home and getting a loan to pay that house off, but you're basically going to be making an equivalent payment towards taxes. The property taxes in Illinois are absolutely sky high, and the 8th highest in the country. There are a few states that are worse, but largely the cost of living as a whole goes way up. It's way higher in Illinois than it is in Tennessee, largely because of the property taxes. You'll see that Tennessee has a 1.71% property tax rate, which is good for the second lowest in the entire country. Once again, only one state is lower, and that's Alabama, which is our neighbor. So second lowest property taxes in the entire country, as opposed to the 8th highest in Illinois. So another thing that goes into the overall cost of living, which doesn't have a huge effect, but it does have some effect, is the monthly utility bill cost of Tennessee versus Illinois. Now, the total utility bill, on average, in Illinois, you'll see about $280 a month, which is 32nd highest out of 50 states. So when you're looking at total utility bills on average in a month in Illinois versus Tennessee, it's going to be very, very close. $280 a month in Illinois versus $305 a month in Tennessee. Basically negligible. Illinois is a little bit lower as far as utilities are concerned, but Tennessee comes in at $305 a month. Now that breaks down into a few different utilities. Looking at the water bill, Illinois, you'll see about a $26 a month water bill. In Tennessee, you might see a $43 a month water bill on average. And your electricity bill in Illinois is going to be lower as well, $87 a month compared to $126 a month in Tennessee on average. While not completely related to the cost of living equation that we're using, most people like to know the distance from Tennessee to Illinois because obviously gas prices have gone up and it is costly to drive, so how far is it from Tennessee to Illinois? So if you were traveling from the biggest cities in each state, we're talking about Nashville and Chicago, you would travel about 442 miles from center of each city to center of each city, or about 7.5 hours. While Tennessee is basically due south of Illinois, it is a very wide state, west to east, so the distance that you drive from one city to the next will vary, but if you go from Memphis, which is in the west part of Tennessee, to Chicago, you would drive 533 miles, or approximately 8 hours. Now on the flip side, if you were to go from Knoxville, which is in the east of Tennessee, to Chicago, it would be 545 miles, or 8.5 hours. So a little bit longer of a drive to Knoxville, but largely about the same. You're talking about 8 hours to 9 hours to get from Chicago down to the main cities in Tennessee. Also, while you're driving, you may experience some time changes. Largely, both states are largely located in the central time zone, but Tennessee does transition into the eastern time zone when you get into the Knoxville area. So the eastern part of Tennessee is in Eastern time, while 2/3 of the entire state of Tennessee are in Central. So as you're driving, you may find that you change time zones along the way. Now, Illinois and most of Tennessee are all in the central time zone. So Western and Middle Tennessee are both in central time zone, just like Illinois. But if you start traveling east, further into the Knoxville area, you will change into the Eastern time zone. So Tennessee has 2 time zones, but largely it's all central time zone. If you're considering the pace of life in Tennessee versus Illinois, they vary pretty differently. Now, the biggest difference is the diverse population in Illinois. Having a major metropolitan area like Chicago just brings a huge amount of diversity, and while Nashville is seeing some of that as well, there's really no comparison of how diverse the population is in Illinois versus Tennessee. So in Tennessee, it's more of a southern sort of lifestyle, and in Illinois, it's more of a urban sort of lifestyle because Illinois is mostly comprised of Chicago, which is very, very diverse. If you've got any questions specifically about any of this, if you want to know what it's like to live in Tennessee, please reach out. We would love to have a conversation with you.